Hey y'all, my name is Max. I'm an instructor at Youth Code Jam, and in this Intro to Python video, we are looking at conditionals. So before we get started with that, we are using a tool to code in Python online called Replit. You can sign up for a free account. If you do so, please get the permission of an adult before you sign up for anything online. But once you have a Replit account or somewhere where you can code in Python, go ahead and open up a new file, make a new project, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. So conditionals are tools that we can use to help computers make decisions. The way they work is by using if-then statements to evaluate an expression and then perform different actions based on whether that expression evaluated to true or whether it evaluated to false. So let's take a look at using one of these. Let's make a variable first and call it fav team. And we'll give that variable a value of Spurs. And don't forget to make this a string. We've got to put it in between double quotes. Okay, so now that we have Spurs in our favorite team variable, we can start with an if statement. So if, we can just type in the word if, and then we can make our expression. So fav team is the same as Spurs. And then for our then in Python, we can just use a colon. When you return now to go to a new line, it will automatically indent for you in Replit. Some editors may not do this, but you need an indent here in Python. And what we can do if this evaluates to true, we can say something like, we can do a print in the console and then say, go Spurs go. And if we print, if we run this, it should print out go Spurs go, which it does, because these two are the same thing. Now there's a couple things to note here. We used two equal signs here to check to see if two things are the same, whereas one equal sign is our assignment operator. So remember, this means that we're going to store a value inside of a named placeholder here. So our fav team is our label, and it has the value of Spurs. But with two equal signs, we're checking to see if two things are the same. And you can think of this as like line 3 as kind of like asking the computer a question. You're saying, hey, are these two things the same? And if they're true, then do whatever's on line 4. But what if they're not true? Well, you can ask the computer, or you can tell the computer to do something if it returns an answer that is false. And the way you can do this is on a new line on the same indent. You can type in else, and then all you need is a colon after else. And then on a new line, it'll automatically indent for you again, and you can print what you want to say when the favorite team isn't the Spurs. So we can do like a surprised face here. So in order for this to print out, we'll need to change this to something like a different team. So if we print this out, if we run this code and print it out, it might take a second if you are coding in a browser. There we go. Okay, so you may have to be a little bit patient if you're coding in a browser. It does depend on the internet. But now we can see that we've got our surprised face here, and I would be surprised if your favorite team wasn't the Spurs. Not really, but since we're based in San Antonio, that's my favorite team. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is look at getting user input. So we can tell the console to ask somebody for to type something in, and then we can get that data back from the console. And the way we're going to do this, let's store that in a variable first. So jersey num, and we'll ask for a jersey num. So the way we can do this is type out input and then open parentheses, close parentheses, and here we will type our prompt. So type the jersey number of your favorite Spur. And this will prompt in our console. So these words will be printed, but our program won't stop running like it normally does, as we can see by this arrow. It will wait until the user types something in and presses enter. Let's see. We won't actually see what's happening in here until we print this out. So let's print jersey num, and that way we can see if it's printing out the same thing. So it says type the jersey number of your favorite Spur, and we can type out 8, and now you can see it it gives us back 8. Let's put that into a let's add a string in here to just tell us what that number is. Otherwise, the console is just going to print out an 8. And remember, we have to separate these values with a comma. So we can just say, add a label for it, jersey number, and then it'll say 8. So we can see now when we run this and type in the number and press enter, it'll present like this, jersey number is 8, which is wonderful, but there is something weird about the way that the computer is giving us this information back. If we wanted to do like any kind of math on this, jersey number plus 1, we should get an error back. Yeah. So it says can only concatenate string, no int to string. So what it's saying is that jersey number is a string. So even though we typed in a number, it's giving us back a string with a number kind of like this. So if we were to type 8 within quotation marks. So what we can do is we can make this an integer by wrapping the whole thing in an integer function. And it'll do the same thing if we run it, but now we know that we can do addition on it if we want to. So let's run that again and just test it out with addition. And now you can see it's 9, even though Python does give us back a string. So it's important to know what type of data things are. Remember, you can also use type. If you don't know what something is, you can put that in there, jersey underscore num. And if we did that before, well, we're doing it in the same step here, so we'll just get back an integer. But you should see now that yes, we have an integer in our jersey number. So let's move on. Now that we've learned how to grab input and make a conditional statement, let's learn one more thing, which is import statements. So sometimes you'll need to use some code, as we will in a little bit, that uses code that's in the Python standard library. And we can import up at the top of our document. If we type in the word import and then the name of whatever we want from the library. So we're going to learn how to make random numbers. So I'm going to type in import random, And you can look online for the Python standard library and see what's available to you to import into your code. So we're going to import random. And the way we can use random is by using methods within random. So let's type out a variable name. So we'll call it random num. And let's give it a value of random. So we're telling Python to go into random and grab something called rand int. And then we can use rand int to generate a random number, but we do have to give rand int a low number and a high number. So the range of the numbers that we want to generate a random number from. So we can give it any two numbers. You can do 0 to 100, and then run our program, and we'll still have to type in our previous code. Let's see. It's not wanting to do anything here because guess what? We're not printing it yet. So our program still stops, and we are doing something. We're storing this number in a variable called random number, but we're not printing it yet. So let's print random num. And now if we want to run our program, we can go through the input we made previously, and you can see the last thing it does is give us a number of 59 here. So in between 0 and 100, everything seems to work okay with that. So I'm going to give you a challenge of making a guessing game, and I'll walk you through some of the code for that. But feel free to add anything afterwards if you want to. You can either make a new project for this if you want to, but you don't have to because we're still kind of just practicing. So let's make a variable for our low number and our high number. That way we can change it if we want to. So low num and give that maybe a 1, and high num and give that a 2. So we're going to use all the things that we learned here to make a simple kind of a guessing game where you have to guess the random number. If we did just 1 and 2, that might not actually give us a very large amount of numbers. That would be a very easy guessing game. So let's make it a little bit harder on ourselves, and instead our high number can be 100. It doesn't matter what you have as your low and your high number. You can type any numbers in here. Okay, now let's make a number called random, or a variable called random num. And we can actually just use the same code that we wrote up here, except for we'll replace 0 and 100 with our variables. So let's copy and paste or cut this code. And instead of typing in specific numbers, let's type in low num and high num. Okay. So now if we run this, it should do the same thing. I still have that input. But yeah, it'll still print out a random number between 1 and 100 this time. So the next thing that we're going to do is we need to grab the guess of whoever is using this program. So they're going to guess in the console what they think the random number is. So let's put that in a variable called guess, and then we will type in input and then our prompt. But we wanna get a number, so let's make this into an integer first before we start typing. So now we have input inside of our integer function, so we know we're expecting numbers back, so we're going to convert it into an integer. So what we'll say is type a number from, and here's the weird part, we can't actually use our variables like we did before, like in a print statement where we separate with a comma and then type in our variable name. We have to use some funky looking placeholders. So we can make two curly brackets, and this will be a placeholder. And the reason is because our input function here only wants us to give it one value. And so we'll say type a number from, and then we'll put a placeholder for our first low number, and then 2 and another placeholder. And then we can prompt the user to type something. And we need another quotation here. Okay, so then what we have to do here is after our string here, we need to say dot format to be able to put the variables into our placeholders here. So and this is also a function, and we need to give this one 2 arguments for this in this case because we have 2 placeholders. So the first one will be low num, and the second one will be high num. And this just means it's going to substitute our placeholder for our first placeholder for the first argument here, and then the second placeholder for the second argument. So now we can get to the logic part where we use conditionals like we did up here to determine a couple things about the guess. So let's start off and say if guess is the same as random num, then we can print out a statement like, wow, that's it. It'd be pretty impressive if you guessed one, if you rolled between 1 and 100, the right number. And then if we want to, we can say what the correct number is here. But since you already guessed that, we don't have to. Then let's add an else. And we can do that by typing else and then a colon, and then press enter to go to a new line. Don't forget that these have to be indented. But if you're in a code editor like Replit, it'll automatically indent for you when you return or when you press enter on at the end of line 22 here. So now what we can do is say something for if the user did not get the guess correct. So we could say like not quite the correct number was. And then here, since this is just a print, we don't have to use these curly placeholders. We can just separate our values with a comma and say random number or num. Okay, so if we run our code, since I have the other input code up there, I have to go through that first. But now we see we have type a number from 1 to 100. So I'll guess 50, and then press enter, and it says not quite the correct number was 35. Now it might take me some time to show you me getting the correct number if it's 1 to 100, so I won't do that. But I will challenge you, if you can, to write another condition here. So right now we have only one condition, but if you want to add more conditions, so you could say elif, and then write a statement. So something like this, comparing two things. and then add another indented case. So if there's another case that you want to check for to ask the computer about, if you want to do something else, that's how you can do that with an elif. So I want you to try to write an elif that checks to see if the number was even in the range that we specified, because we're not doing that right now. So if I ran my program and I said a really big number, it'll still be wrong, but it won't tell me that why it was wrong. So if your challenge is to write another elif that checks to see if the number is in range. So you might have to use some different comparators, like greater than or less than. Awesome. So I can't wait to see what you come up with for your challenge. And we'll see you in the next Spurs Give Coding Camp video.